Hi guys, this is Anderson Thiago from New Wave of Traditional Heavy Metal Full Albums, and I'm back with a new episode of Metal Chatter, a series where I talk about some of my favorite records in heavy metal. In the first episode, I talk about live albums. In the second one, I talked about releases by Metal Blade Records, and this time we're gonna talk about the new wave of British heavy metal. Seriously, for me, the new wave of British heavy metal is the most important movement in music history. And it's something that is very dear to me. So this episode was really complicated to do because I had to choose like my 5 favorite new wave of British heavy metal records. And this is not an easy task. Just like the previous video on Metal Blade Records, I cheated a little bit and I have 5 albums tied for the 5th position of my top 5. And I also have an extra special recommendation. But before I start with the list, let me say thank you to Mauro Sestaroli for subscribing to the Patreon and supporting the channel. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining the amazing group of supporters that I have on the Patreon. And to all the other patrons, thank you so much for everything you do. If you want to join them, there's a link on the description and you can donate from €1 to €10. It depends on you. I thank you so much for this because it really helps to keep the channel going. So let's go to the list and to the records. And like I said, for the 5th position, I have 5 albums tied because I can't decide between them. One day I'm more inclined to choose one, the other day I'm more inclined to choose the other. So let me show you and then tell me what you think, which one should be the 5th position. I have Tigers of Paintang, Spellbound. This is the 2nd album featuring the singer John Deverell and also John Sykes, who is one of my favorite guitar players, especially for what he did in Whitesnake. Tigers of Paintang, Spellbound, featuring classics like Gangland and Hellbound. Also tied for the 5th position, I have the Tokyo Blade self-titled debut, featuring Alan March on vocals, and you have songs like Break the Chains, If Heaven is Hell. So Tokyo Blade self-titled album. The next one is Diamond Head, Lightning to the Nations, and I got to this one a little bit later in my life compared to the other ones, because when I was starting to listen to the new wave of British heavy metal and learning about the best albums, I always heard people talking about Diamond Head, Lightning to the Nations, and it was a huge influence for bands like Metallica and other bands of American heavy metal, of course. But it was difficult to find it to listen back then in Brazil because there was no the internet was not available for everyone. I actually had my first computer, I think, in 2008. So before that, if I wanted to listen to one band, I had to know someone who had the album, or I had to pay a guy that I met in an online page that he would download the album and record it on a CD for me. These were the only ways that I could discover a new album back then when I was a teenager. So I never had the opportunity to listen to Diamond Head back then. But at some point in my life, I got to listen to Diamond Head, Lightning to the Nations. I have to admit that it was a grower on me. It wasn't an immediate impact. Like I listened and for the first time and oh, this is great. But it was definitely a grower, and now I can fully enjoy how good this album is. Diamond Head, Lightning to the Nations. The next one is Titan, Rough Justice. For this video on the new wave of British heavy metal, I chose to draw the line in 1984 as the last year for the new wave of British heavy metal. This is the most common timeline for the movement. It ends in 1984. The bands, of course, continue, but the albums released after that are considered by many people to be post-new wave of British heavy metal and not really a part of the main movement. This album was released in 1985. This is an exception because it was actually recorded in between 82 and 83, and it was released after the band had split up. So This is why this is an exception to the rule. And this album, it was love at the first listening. I still remember it was one of the albums that I paid the guy to record for me. And the first time I listened to the song Blind Men and Fools, it was like, oh my god. And I still like this album very much. And the singer here is great, Carl Swan. He later joined the American band called Lion and continued with a band, hard rock band called Bad Moon Rising. So, Rough Justice by Titan. And the last one for the albums tied for the fifth position is Satan Court in the Act. This is another example of love at first listening. When I first listened to the intro and then Trial by Fire, still to this day one of my favorite new wave of British heavy metal songs. And of course there are other great songs here like Blades of Steel, Break Free, Alone in the Dark, The Dark Side of Innocence is a great album. And of course it features Brian Ross. If I had to choose one singer to exemplify what the new wave of British heavy metal be, it would be him. After this album, they changed lineup. They changed singers, released other good albums, changed name to Blind Fury, released a great album, Out of Reach. I have it there. And but in 2011, I think they came back and they released one of the best comeback albums of all time. It's here. Just a moment. Life Sentence. If you haven't listened to this album, go listen to it because it's great. So, tied for the fifth position, we have Satan Court in the Act, Titan Rough Justice, Diamond Head Lightning to the Nations, Tokyo Blade self-titled album, and Tigers of Painting Spellbound. On the fourth position, we have the most surprising choice of this list. Especially for you, because I think none of you would put this album on your own list, but I will. And I'm talking about Avenger, Bloodsports. My relationship with this album is funny because, like I said, when I was learning and starting to listen to the new wave of British heavy metal, I would pay this guy to put albums on a CD for me. A few months afterwards, when I started working in a video game place where people would go to play video games, and I would be responsible for the whole place, I started earning money. So I wanted to buy records, I wanted to buy CDs. And then I went to the store, and all of the new wave of British heavy metal albums were very expensive. They still are in Brazil. And the only one I could afford with the money I had was Bloodsports by Avenger. So I bought it. And when I got home, I put it on my CD player, and in the first riffs of Enforcer, I was sold to it. And still has one of my favorite tracks of the new wave of British heavy metal here. And one track that I listen today and I feel like pumped and ready to do anything. I'm talking about You Never Take Me Alive. And I really like this album, especially the vocals of Ian Swift. And he's one of my idols in the new wave of British heavy metal. I didn't have the opportunity to meet him yet, but I hope I do in the future and I see Avenger live sometime. So, Avenger Bloodsport's the most surprising choice on this list. The next one, it could be any of the albums by this band from their second album to their 1985 album Crusader. And of course I'm talking about Saxon. I could choose like Wheels of Steel, Danny and Ladder. I could choose Power and the Glory, but I chose Strong Arm of the Law. It's amazing how Saxon was in such a creative spree that they released albums like Wheels of Steel and Strong Arm of the Law, two all-time classics, in the same year. And a year after they release Denny and Letter, and the year after they release uh, Power and the Glory, it's amazing how it's possible, because today we have bands like they take 3 to 4 5 years to release an album. They were like in Super Mario World when you get the star. Yeah, Saxon, Strong Arm of the Law. You have Heavy Metal Thunder, To Hell and Back Again, Strong Arm of the Law, of course, 20,000 Feet, Dallas 1 p.m. So great songs here. Saxon, Strong Arm of the Law. Stop, Get Out. The next one is a band that is always hard for me to like. When I think of new wave of British heavy metal and I think about them, I always have the question: when do they stop being a new wave of British heavy metal band? When you can draw the line and say, from here now on, they are not a new wave of British heavy metal band anymore. For bands like Def Leppard, this is easy to do. I say that On Through the Night and High and Dry are new wave of British heavy metal albums. Pyromania is not. This next band, I don't know where to draw the line, but for this video I chose Killers by Iron Maiden, their second album and the last one with Paul Di'Anno on vocals. Of course, it's an all-time classic heavy metal album. Songs like Rothschild, Murders in the Rue Morgue, Killers, it's my favorite song here, the title track. It's a great album overall, and I would say, like, quality wise, it would be the top one of this list. But for an emotional attachment to the number one album, I chose it to be number two. So, Iron Maiden, Killers. And my number one new wave of British heavy metal album of all time, some of you may have guessed already, it's N.W.O.B.H.M, the self-titled album. There's no much I can talk about an album that it's perfection from the first song to the last. There's no filler song here. There's no bad song here. You have Angel Witch, Atlantis, White Witch, my favorite one, Gorgon. You have Sweet Danger, Angel of Death. It's a 10 out of 10 album here. For me, they are the textbook definition of new wave of British heavy metal, and this is why they are the first one. Angel Witch, the self-titled album. Now, you remember that I said that I had that extra special recommendation, and this is a band that I got to know fairly recently compared to the other ones on this list. And they are a band like many others in the new wave of British heavy metal that just released a single and then a demo before they split up without releasing anything else. But my friends at No Remorse Records, they reissued this album featuring 5 tracks, and it's great. And you ask yourself, how is it possible that these guys didn't make it? It's like it's crazy. And I'm talking about Virtue, We Stand to Fight. If you don't have this record, you can try to get it. I think it's sold out most of the places, but you can still find people selling it online. It's a great album, and it's definitely worth your money. So we have Virtue, We Stand to Fight. There's 5 songs here. It's my extra special recommendation. And now it's time for the honorable mentions, and there's a lot of them, so I'm not going to talk a lot about, but let's go. Like I said, I could have chosen any Saxon album of from their second one to the 5th one. So we have Wheels of Steel, Denny and Letter, and Power and the Glory. Also the self-titled album by Iron Maiden. Like I said, Def Leppard, One Through the Night, and High and Dry. Second album by Avenger, Killer Elite. Some people say that this album is better than Bloodsports, but because of my connection to Bloodsports, I think that one is better. Tigers of Painting Wildcat, the debut album with a different singer, is more raw and less melodic than what they did in Spellbound. And their third album, Crazy Nights, this one is even more melodic than Spellbound, and they would go even more melodic as the time goes by with The Cage. The Cage, in my opinion, is the Hysteria, Def Leppard's Hysteria before Def Leppard Hysteria was released. Night of the Blade by Tokyo Blade featuring singer Vicky Wright, and me and my friends back in Brazil, we would have like the team Alan March and the team Vic Wright, people who think that their album with Alan March is better, and people that think that their album with Vic Wright is better. Raven, All for One, and Wipe It Out. Raven with their Athletic Rock. Demon, Night of the Demon. I still remember to this day the first time I listened to this, it was, oh my god, so good. Cloven Hoof, the first EP, the opening ritual, when they were still like more obscure. I prefer their albums later when they were like more American metal than British, like albums like Dominator and Sultan's Ransom. But this one is still good. Sanson Survivors featuring Bruce Dixon. It should have been Shock Tactics here, but I don't own it, so I chose Survivors. Savage, Loose and Lethal, and Quartz, Stand Up and Fight. There's more. We have the two compilations, Metal for Murders, the number 1 and number 2. Jaguar, Power Games. Holocaust, The Nightcomers. Battle Axe, Power from the Universe. Chateau, Chained and Desperate featuring Steve Grimmett from Grim Reaper on vocals. If I owned any of the Grim Reaper albums, especially See You in Hell or Fear No Evil, they would have been on my top 5. But since it's almost impossible to get it, I couldn't. Chariot, The Warrior. Blade Hunter, Hunted, recently reissued by my friends at Cult Metal Classics. Also from Cult Metal Classics, I have here some anthologies and compilations, just like the virtual album. And the first one I have here is by Crucifixion. And we have here like the anthology 1980 to 1984. Also by Cult Metal Classics. This one was released by Shadow Kingdom Records, and it features all recordings from a band that was called Slayer and later renamed Dragon Slayer. This one is Tyrant from the new wave of British heavy metal. They released a single called Hold Back the Lightning. This one featured the singles plus some bonus tracks from No Remorse. And this one is Valhalla, Lightning in the Sky. It's an anthology by Cult Metal Classics as well. I hope you liked this episode on the new wave of British heavy metal. It was very fun to talk about these records, but not very fun to have to choose between them. And on the comments, you leave your favorite new wave of British heavy metal albums, and of course, suggestions to the next metal chapter. Thank you so much, guys. See you soon, and bye bye.